Hello everybody, welcome back. Jiu-Jitsu 2000 here today. I'm back with the Pathfinder Phase 1 training. We're on Block 2, Module 2. We're going to be making camp today. And what I want to talk about first and foremost is for this module, you're going to need some tent stakes. Now I just happened to pick up 4 Coughlin's tent stakes. These are plastic 6-inch stakes. I don't even think I'm going to need all 4, to be honest with you. But behind me, let me show you what I got going on here. Right now, here on the right and the left, I have a tree right here, and then I have another tree right here. Now what my objective is to put a ridge line up between these 2 trees, and I'm going to play with 3 different tarp configurations. I'm going to go ahead and get this ridge line up, and I'll be back with you. So make sure you got some tent stakes and some sort of batoning device or a mallet or something to pound these in. To get started on this ridge line, first thing I want to do is I want to come around this tree about hip high. If it's in the summertime, I can afford to go a little higher, maybe chest high. And if it's really cold, wet, miserable, windy, snowy, things like that, my ridge line will go a little lower. But for today, again, I'm going to go about hip high on this tree. Again, I'm going to be using my 550 cord, my parachute cord. What I want to do here is I want to take this cordage and I'm going to wrap it around the tree here. Okay folks, here's what we have here. I have the working end in my right hand here, and I have the standing end in my left hand. What I want to do is I want to make a small loop right here on this left one. And I'm going to take the working end and I'm going to come inside this loop. I'm going to come underneath this standing end here. And normally a bowline would terminate by going straight in the loop like this. And then I would have my standard bowline as we know it right there. And this would generally work really good. But what I want to do today is I want to make a variation of that bowline. And I want to do what they call a slippery bowline. The reason I want this is because it has a very quick release ability. So as I come underneath the standing end with this working end, I'm going to create a bite in my loop, and I'm going to stick the whole bite through the hole here. Hopefully you can see that. Just like this, and I'm going to pull everything nice and tight. Now you're probably wondering why I needed to do that. What that does, see, even though this is nice and tight, what that does is it leaves me a little tag here that when I get finished, I can pull this tag and everything easily undoes. It just comes out really nice. Okay folks, on the other side here, I want to come around this tree. I'm going to measure my rope. I'm going to get enough probably to be about here, and I'm going to go ahead and cut this rope right here. So using my spool tool, I have a nice little razor blade. See that? Makes a nice clean cut. I can set my cordage down, and now coming about a hip length away from the tree, I'm going to make a slip knot. Just like this. Nothing crazy. This continues to go around the tree, and it comes back. And what my plan is to bring this working in through the slip knot here, and I'm going to pull this back towards the tree just like this, nice and tight. And once I get this thing secure, I'm going to bite this with my fingers. Kind of hard to hold on to if it's really tight. I'm going to set this over. I'm going to pull the tail through, and without letting this standing end come through, I'm going to jerk this loop back towards the knot as I let go, just like that. That'll give you a nice trucker's hitch, and this will finalize my ridge line. The nice thing about doing it this way is when I'm finished, I can just pull this and it all undoes itself. So now I'm going to do that one more time, and I'm going to show you. This is a really good setup. I'm going to pull that slip knot out. Now let me show you one more time. So I'm going to come a little bit away from the tree. I'm going to make right here, I'm going to make a small trucker's hitch, or a slip knot if you will. This whole concoction, when it's set up, is referred to as a trucker's hitch. So there's my slip knot. Again, I'm going to run this working end around the tree. Again, making sure that I'm around hip height. Now this is the part that came around the back side of the tree. I'm going to stick it through this loop. See that? Right here. And I'm going to pull this back. And this cinches itself nice and tight. See this right here? Makes a nice tight ridge line. Now squeezing these together, this is kind of a pickle sometimes because it's really tight. I'm going to take this whole thing, making a big bite or a big loop. See that loop there? I'm going to reach through that loop and I'm going to pull just a portion of this through. Not the whole thing. I don't want the whole tail to come through. So I'm going to leave that tail over there dangling over there by you. I want to make sure I have plenty of that left. Now as I jerk this loop towards my knot, I'm going to let go of the knot. See that? That'll bite nice and clean. And again, it's a nice quick release option. And I have this loop right here. I'll talk about this loop here in a second. Okay, so right here you can see I have my trucker's hitch. I want to secure this tarp, so I'm going to make this bite go through the grommet hole, just like this. And I'm going to put this tent stake through, and I'm going to pull this nice and tight. That secures this whole portion from going anywhere. I have a small piece of rope. What I want to do is I want to make a loop for a prusik. So I'm going to make an overhand knot here. What my plan is to make a fisherman's knot. So if you haven't seen the fisherman's knot, please go check out my knot videos. It's a simple overhand knot, and where the tail end, or should I say that the working end comes through, I'm going to take the other end of the line and I'm going to go in the same hole that came out of. I'm going to tighten this around itself. Now this new working end is going to basically make an overhand knot around the first one. So it'll be something like that, and there it is. When I pull these together, look what happens. They come against themselves. Now when I come to my ridge line right here, to secure my tarp, I need a prusik. This is called a fisherman's knot. This just gives me the loop. Now I need the prusik, so I'm going to lay the rope over and I'm going to make a lark's foot or a lark's head. Okay? Then I'm going to do that a second time by opening this up. Go through a second time. And let's do that one more time. A third time, that creates, whoops, it's kind of slipping there. That creates what we call the prusik. Now, it's very important to dress this knot so that it's very clean. I don't want like a bunch of dirty knots here. I want something that's very clean because it's going to be functional the cleaner it is. And what this does is it allows me to pull against the ridgeline in either direction, and it'll keep things tight. It'll also give me the ability to loosen this thing and move my ridgeline, should I say my tarp, in either direction to where I want it to lock. See, it'll lock there. So now, taking two things, I'm going to find a small stick I'm going to use as a toggle. If you don't have a toggle, you can also use another tent stake. And what I want to do here is I want to loosen this up first and foremost. I'm going to make a small bite in this loop. I'm going to run it up through the tarp, and using a toggle or another tent stake, it doesn't really matter, just something that's going to bite, I'm going to pull this back. What this is going to do is this is going to hold my tarp nice and tight, and it's not going to let it slip. So that's going to be the start to my shelter. Let me give you another view of that, and instead of using a toggle, I'm going to use an additional tent stake. So again, we have our tarp right here. We have our prusik already put onto the ridge line. We're going to put a bite through the tarp, just like this. We're going to stick our tent stake through there, and now we're going to tighten our prusik by pulling it away. Doesn't have to be crazy. Now, the cleaner this knot is, again, the better you dress this knot and the cleaner it is, the better it's going to work for you. our tarp a little bit. We're going to take one of these ends here, putting a loop through. We're going to put a bite through, and then we have both of these. We're just going to stick these around the tent stake right here, and I'm going to come back a little bit of an angle, just like this, and I'm just going to pound this in the ground. Doesn't have to be anything crazy. It's pretty simple, folks. I'm going to repeat the process over here. Just like this. I'm going to make a bite. Stick this through the hole. Come together. Run this around my stake. And let's see. Come over here just like this. That shelter is just about done. I'm going to pull this one back out. I want to drag it this way just a little bit. There's my lean-to shelter. Pretty simple setup. I like this design a lot. Has plenty of room inside. On the back here, right about where my finger is, if it was really winter conditions, you could put a bunch of debris all along this area right here. And what that would do was that would help insulate convection from coming underneath and getting into your living space. This is my basic lean-to shelter. You can see, obviously I got to move some of these pine cones and rocks and things like that from out of here. But this is going to give me plenty of protection away from the rain, away from the sun, away from wind, which comes from that side. That's why I chose to change my tarp angle to this side. And if you want to lift this up, it's not that bad. You can take a long board, like find a pole that doesn't have any knots or anything that's going to put holes in this tarp, and you could kind of pop it up like this and it'll hold the tarp away from you. But I like this configuration. This is my personal favorite. Okay folks, here's one of my 3 tarp configurations that I like to use. This one's the lean-to design. So what it has is it has a ridge line right here. Hopefully you can see that. That's my ridge line, and I've used tent stakes on both sides here. I have a tent stake here. I have a tent stake back here on the back side. Hopefully you can see that. And then there's 2 of them in the ground. This is a good shelter. I really like this setup. Works good. Here's another tarp configuration that's very easy to build. This is an A-frame type design. You can see there's plenty of room for me to get inside here, and I can lay down and I have plenty of cover. This is good for when it's really cold outside. It's also good when you're getting a pretty good downpour because you have a nice pitched roof that keeps everything off of you. Again, this is the A-frame. This is an easy design. I like it. Also, I had to lower my ridge line a little bit because the tarp that I'm using is a smaller tarp. But this again, folks, is the A-frame. It's plenty of room for a decent shelter for a night. I have this Mylar reflective coating in here, and if I had a small fire, it would really reflect heat into this shelter really well. I like this setup. It's a good shelter. Okay folks, this is the plow point setup. This is also plenty of room in this shelter to get me out of the elements. I can have a nice fire right here. Keeps me out of the rain. The cool thing about this shelter is it's not necessary, as you can see, to have a complete ridge line. You can get by with less amount of cordage for this because all you have to do is tie down to a tree. So you don't need 30 feet of cordage. You can get by with 6 feet of cordage. You have 3 points that are staked out, 1, 2, 3, and this is the plow point configuration. It works pretty well. It's get another view of it. I had a little bit of trouble because the area where I'm at, right here, you can see kind of by that stake, there's a lot of rocks in the ground here. So I was hitting a lot of rocks and stuff, so I had to kind of move my tarp around a little bit and stuff like that. But this, again, folks, is the plow point. Works good. But out of all three of the tarp configurations, I like the lean-to design the best. Okay, folks, here's another example of an A-frame tarp setup. And in this one, I'm using a drop cloth. Now, to set this up on a ridge line, there's a couple of obstacles that you run into, and that is that these drop cloths don't have any grommets on them. So I like to take like a pine cone, or I'll pack some dirt or something, and I use what I call external grommets. So you can see down there on the ground, I have one there, usually like a pine cone or something. And then on the back corner, I have another external grommet. And then on the other side of the ridge, I have one there. And then down here by my foot, I have one. Now this shelter is nice because it's really large. This is a 16 by 9 big heavy duty canvas drop cloth that I get at my local Home Depot. I like this shelter setup. Works pretty well. Gives you tons of shade, and here in the Southwest where I live, this is a good option. This one and the lean-to option are my favorites for the Southwest. Another thing I like about these is you can raise your ridge line a little bit and get a little more headroom inside. It's a good setup. Plenty of room for two people in this one, easily. Okay, folks, here's another plow point configuration using a drop cloth. So I'm basically sitting on the ridge line right here. I'm using this as an external grommet. I have that corner down there staked down, and I also have this corner over here staked down, as well as the back, way back there in the distance, staked down. Now this shelter was good in the fact that it has a lot of room inside, but I had to put this beam, this little pole in here to get this up, because if I wouldn't have had that pole, the roof would have been way down here by my hand. Now I used my sweater so that the stick won't tear a hole through this material. But you can see that there's plenty of room in this shelter. You could probably get 4 or 5 people in this shelter. And again, folks, this is using a standard drop cloth. This is a plow point design. It's a pretty cool shelter. You know, even above my head, you can see there's plenty of room. And this will keep me out of the rain, it'll keep me out of the sun, it'll keep me nice and warm. I could have a fire right here, you know. If I wanted to put a fire right here down by my knees or something, I could have a nice fire here. Plenty of gear, plenty of room. Again, this is the plow point setup. Very easy to make, very effective. Okay, folks, here's my lean-to tarp configuration using a 16 by 9 drop cloth. Inside, you can see that it, once again, to raise this inner height, I had to put a nice little stick inside. And again, to keep it from tearing up my drop cloth, I used my coat to give it something to protect this cloth. There's plenty of room inside here. I can raise and lower the ridge line as needed, depending on what's going on. I can have my fire right here, which would reflect heat into my shelter. If I wanted to put some sort of protection on the side from wind or something like that, I could pile up debris. This is just a good shelter. In my personal opinion, I like this one the best. Now, if you don't want to have sticks inside holding your shelter up, you could put an external grommet inside here, and if there was a tree somewhere out back, you could run a line out to that tree and it would hold it up for you. So this again, folks, is my lean-to setup using my 16x9 drop cloth. It's a good setup. Again, external grommets, and I like this setup the most of all three of the designs because it doesn't take but only 2 stakes. Works great.